Straight off the top of this video, I just want to make it clear that I don't think this update is going to make it to live servers. There's just so much inherently wrong with this entire PTB and current system that is being tested. Today, I'm going to go through the biggest issues and give my own feedback. This entire update is just incredibly frustrating across the board. I want to start with the perk changes. This update saw large changes to survivor perks that had to do with either being tunneled or giving protection once unhooked. Off the record, Babysitter, Breakdown, Borrowed Time, and Wicked were all given new effects. Off the record and Borrowed Time seem relatively fine changes. I don't have much of a concern with either of these, but I could be wrong. They're both fine effects that update them to fit into the system. OTR was one of the best perks in the game. However, with the base endurance being increased by an additional 20 seconds, I don't think it's necessary to be as strong or as prevalent as it was beforehand. Borrowed Time has all but disappeared from the game since it was made redundant in 6.1.0. Now it has a brand new effect that could see some actual use cases outside of just extending the unhook protection like it has for the past 3 years. I do though have major issues with Breakdown, Babysitter, and Wicked. I want to start with Babysitter because this is the perk that we just can't seem to get right. Babysitter has been quietly overpowered for a long time now. People just haven't used it because it's not as in your face about how strong it is. This rework makes it much more blatant with how strong it's going to be. Now, Babysitter will allow the unhooker to see the aura of the survivor they unhooked and the killer for the next 30 seconds. This is a lot of information. Being able to see the teammate, I think, is completely fine. It's nice info and can allow for you to come and protect them in the rare case where the killer will want to come and tunnel them out. This part of the perk is fine, however, 30 seconds of aura reveal on the killer is a really long time. The duration has two major layers of issues that I can think of. Firstly, this aura reveal would allow for you to be able to call out the killer no matter where they are on the map, so teammates are given more time to either pre-run the killer or hide nearby. This issue is a bit easier to ignore because, unfortunately, Survive with Friends could already do this without the presence of this perk. However, anything that does just give upfront information like this will inherently make giving it out to teammates much easier. If this was the only case, I wouldn't mind it as much. It would still be extremely strong, but what takes it over the edge into being extremely silly is the strength that the perk has in chase. The aura reveal is not turned off by entering a chase with the killer. This allows for survivors to just straight up have up to 30 seconds of aura reveal and chase, completely negating the existence of any mind games that a killer can use. This forces you into a situation where you either continue to try and mind game unsuccessfully, or just brute force every loop for the next 30 seconds. There are a few fixes to this. My personal suggestion is either removing killer aura from the perk completely and doubling the aura read to 60 seconds for the person you rescued, or keeping the killer aura read and removing the aura as soon as you enter chase with the killer. Moving on though, I'd like to discuss Wicked and Breakdown at the same time. These two perks do the same thing in different ways. Breakdown will of course break the hook once you're unhooked, but it will also now increase the speed at which you are healed by 100% for the next 90 seconds. This includes self-heals as well. Perks like Botany Knowledge and Desperate Measures are already incredibly strong and allow survivors some very fast heals. This plays as a replacement or an addition to that. Wicked on the other hand will allow you to heal up to 50% of your health state after being unhooked in the basement. While this perk I genuinely think would be okay by itself, when combined with an extremely strong meta perk and Resurgence, it becomes a literal insta-heal. This creates scenarios where survivors can force killers into situations where there is no correct option. The large, overarching issue with these perks is the same issue that is attached to Resurgence, Botany Knowledge, Solidarity, and Desperate Measures, as well as a few more. There is a massive reduction in time needed for survivors to reset using these perks. Resetting is an essential part of killer pressure in the game. With survivors' resetting time being reduced more and more, over and over again, it leads to killers' pressures falling apart much faster. Not one of these singular changes are enough to be extremely effective. However, with all of the buffs to healing speed, it has become extremely noticeable and will continue to hurt the pressure building segments of a match. The next thing I want to discuss is the changes to the medkit add-ons. The syringe will no longer gradually heal someone over time, but will now allow for a survivor to immediately recover from exhaustion. This, of course, allows for multiple uses of Life or Sprint Burst. While I do think this is weaker than the syringe was, it does now have a new issue that is something that Behavior has said over and over that they want to try and avoid, but continue to perpetrate it. This is another item in the game where lower tier or low mobility killers are severely punished by it. These killers just simply lose a lot by survivors using something like Sprint Burst twice in a row. Blight and the rest of the Olympic sprinters immediately close the gap and continue the chase. Keep this in mind, I'll have a bit more to say about this topic later on. Styptics seem relatively fine by themselves. However, with all the changes to perks that have happened recently, it just leans into the extremely fast healing that I've already talked about. These are just bad changes with these items, point blank period. Syringes would be okay if every killer has Blight, but the vast majority are not. Styptics would be fine if there weren't 10 plus perks that make healing extremely strong. This is an item that now pairs with those perks to make it even better. Now that we've covered the perk changes, I want to take some time to talk about the anti-slugging changes before moving on to the main event, which is our anti-tunnel changes. I don't really have a lot of thoughts on the anti-slug. I don't really play killers that are severely hit by this, but I do think it's a bit alarming that we've seen literally zero compensation buffs to the killers who really need to slug. Recently, I've been partaking in a bit of Oni. I'm nowhere near an Oni main, but I would love to hear the opinions of people who do play those characters that rely on slugging survivors. I genuinely do not know how bad this is for Oni or Twins. The biggest thing from this PTB is the new anti-tunnel system. We originally tested this in September, and it was a terrible change at that time. Behavior put it back in the oven for another few months, and now here we are. I want to start with the base Bloodlust system because it just doesn't make any sense right now. I will be using Freddy as the example because of course I will. The new Bloodlust system will activate after a hook for the next 15 seconds. It ends after a chase begins, or the killer breaks a pallet. However, the biggest one, and the one that's more than likely going to cancel your Bloodlust most of the time, is utilizing your power. Freddy, for some reason, uses Dream Projection and does lose the Bloodlust effect, which, while unnecessary, does make sense. However, using the perk Rapid Brutality causes you to keep the hook Bloodlust benefit after you use Dream Projection. I think this is a bug, but I wanted to bring it up just in case it hasn't been noticed. The point of this system is to try and give killers a bit of a reward when they hook someone. Even if we just ignore the fact that the amount of distance this gives you is extremely negligible and does practically nothing, 5% is just such a nothing burger number. Ask yourself, what is better? Having a survivor out of the game as early as possible, or going very, very slightly faster for up to 15 seconds without being able to use your power, break a pallet, or start a chase, while also trying to get as many hooks as possible. This reward is straight up nothing. In the dev notes, Behavior said that this is meant to allow killers who use their basic attacks more often instead of their power to have access to the Bloodlust benefit, completely ignoring that someone like Dredge or Ghostface often will use their power on or soon after hooking someone, which completely cancels the haste effect. Also, Myers loses his haste for stalking, which is often used as a way to scan the map for survivors. This is just not a good enough solution. One of the few things from the last PTB that people pretty much universally agreed on was that the killer buffs were mostly good. They just didn't stack up to what survivors were given in exchange. The removal of the punishments were absolutely a step in the right direction, but scrapping the situation entirely was just not a benefit. In my last video, I made the comparison between Trapper and Spirit in this last system. The base kit effects did not benefit them both to the same degree. This system outright benefits neither of them. Trapper can't place traps, and if Spirit wants to move fast, she can just use her power. There is literally no power gained for Trapper and none lost for the Spirit. The massive gap still exists and arguably has been widened even further by these desperate attempts to fix something that cannot be fixed unless you actually make killers stronger instead of giving very small, meaningless buffs that don't move the needle at all. The blood point boost is nice, I guess, but does literally nothing to help improve killer match quality. I'm a big fan of getting blood points, but if I care about winning, then points are the absolute least of my concern. This is another change that will do absolutely nothing outside of giving a reward for playing in the most difficult, stressful way possible. The survivor side of this is, as expected, extremely strong. I want to quickly give a shout out to a tweet from Pixelbush that will help me sum up how I feel about all of this. If you play Survivor, your experience is going to be very, very good. You cannot be tunneled, you always have a pallet, you have extremely strong perks across the board, you have extremely strong items with strong add-ons. Maps are very much weighted in your favor. The only thing that can sour this experience is just playing against killers that you dislike. But the overall experience of Survivor is just extremely good right now. The downside of this is that the killer experience has been nuked into the ground by continuously bad updates, with this one being the biggest one so far. I don't know how to say this in a nice way, so I'm just gonna say it. The game just cannot continue to cater to people who refuse to learn the game on both sides of the aisle. There was a period of time where Behavior did cater to killers who refused to actually play the game well, most notably being the 3-gen meta, as well as a few times after that, but for the past 2 years, give or take a bit, we've seen a shift from actually attempting to balance the game to just making Survivor as easy as possible for the people who either will not learn the game or do not have the resources to learn the game. The consequences of making the game better for bad players is that the game becomes laughably easy for people who do know how to play the game. This is just not sustainable. The direction of Dead by Daylight has got to change, or else the alienation of your core audience who has stuck around is just going to continue and eventually lead to the game losing people who care about it. Honestly, if I did not enjoy the video making process and the community I cultivated as a creator, I just would not play this game anymore. I would have moved on to something else and forgotten about Dead by Daylight. The changes that are being made are just not good. It's as simple as that. They're not equal, and the most unfortunate thing, they're extremely boring. There is nothing interesting being implemented with this. It's existing mechanics that are being recycled and presented as something new. At this point, I see two options going forward for behavior. First, they could just drop this system and forget about it for a while. Tunneling and camping, honestly, already have a lot of counters. If people can't be bothered to equip the free perk from Bill or take a hit for their teammate who's actively being tunneled, that is a straight up refusal to use options that are in the game. Yes, I do think it's extremely silly that there is not a free, universal perk that survivors can use to protect themselves from tunneling, but that is on behavior for not implementing one. A killer shouldn't be punished because people can't be bothered to equip the perk to protect themselves. It's the same way I feel about the term gen rushing. If you can't be bothered to bring perks to protect your generators, you should probably expect them to go fast. This is probably the best option. Giving the system some more time to cook is just objectively a good thing to do. This system is just not ready to come to live servers. In fact, it's nowhere near ready and won't be for another few variations of it more than likely. The second option is just pushing it to live. I don't think this is going to happen. I do trust behavior enough to realize that this is not good. They have specified that this is a test, but there is a chance that it happens. In that situation, I foresee the next few months being some of the most frustrating in the game's history and something that a lot of people will just not want to interact with. There has been so many resources put into this. Behavior is just not going to abandon it. However, as someone who's played this game a lot for many years, I have seen them force through things much smaller than this. So eventually this will be in the game. The question is, how soon will it be? Quite frankly, we need another test. There needs to be actual killer benefits that are meaningful to every killer, not just the ones with mobility. The aura reveal and generator kicks were a good place to start, however, needed to be tested more than they actually were. Moving forward, I would heavily suggest reintroducing the killer benefits we had from the first test and using them going forward. While some may feel that it made killer feel cookie cutter, I would rather deal with cookie cutter gameplay than have one side of the game that was already strong be buffed across the board, while the other side is only good at making money now. Reintroduce actual killer benefits, and then we can look at this system again. Let's quickly do a speedrun of other things introduced in this PTB that are just genuinely terrible. First off, Furtive Chase has been butchered. I actually think the new version of the perk is cool, but sacrificed a good, healthy design in exchange for something that is just objectively weaker. This new Furtive Chase should have either been a brand new perk, or just put on a bad perk that nobody uses like No Quarter, or one of the other nothing burger perks that we have in the perk list. Secondly, Pinhead is now in the ground. You can now literally parry this guy's chains. They took a mediocre killer and made him worse. And for some reason, decided to buff Singularity, who was already one of the best killers in the game. These last two are some of the most annoying things about modern behavior. Singularity is strong enough to just take a flat nerf. Pinhead is not. Despite that, Singularity gets buffed and Pinhead gets nerfed. It's incredibly silly and just does not make any sense to me where this even comes from beyond just making changes without a lot of thought behind them. Moving on from that before I get annoyed, I'll be covering Skull Merchant in her own video soon, but until then, I will say that she is better. This is probably what she should have been and when she got her massive nerf last year. The killer isn't really my thing anymore. I was a fan of the second version of Skull Merchant, but this is a lot of effort for minimal reward. However, I am happy for the people who do like the killer. Also, and this is something I'm sure a lot of people have noticed too, this patch was meant to cover a lot of bugs that have been steadily growing over the past few years, yet the bug list is incredibly small and only covers recent bugs. At this point, I don't know if they're just lying or if they just forgot about it. Behavior has had a nasty habit of promising community things throughout the years and then just not following up on what they promise. So, at this point, I genuinely just do not know what is and isn't intentional. This PTB is a lot and misses the mark across the board. I don't know where we go next from here, but if this system is something that we are dead set on coming to the game, I cannot stress enough how important it is to not push it to live in its current state. Not only does this not solve the issue it wants to solve, it introduces new issues that just weren't there beforehand. 2025 has been a rough year for this game. I would love to see it end on a positive note by listening to the core player base of people who want the game to improve, and not just want their side to be the easy mode. This is not the solution, and more than likely will not be the solution for a long time. I'm not really sure how much clearer I can make that. If you want to support me, you can leave a like, and if you'd like to stick around, you can subscribe. My Discord server and Twitch channel are both linked in the description. My name is Kasir, and I will see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.